Hello and welcome everyone to this conversation as part of our BALEAP Slow PIM on professional growth and development in EAP. My name is Lachlan Moyle and I'm one of the EAP teachers at Queen Mary University of London. And I'm delighted to be talking today to Dr. Ian Bruce of the University of Waikato in New Zealand. Ian has written on topics such as the construction of EAP and its practitioners, highlighting the diverse communities of practice involved in EAP and the varying definitions and expectations that arise from those different perspectives. Ian, your research often addresses how EAP is defined and represented within the field itself, as well as by other academic communities. And in the way in which the university actually presents us as practitioners, not least in things like its promotional materials. Thank you particularly for agreeing to talk to us, though, about the way in which we can develop our practice and our professional skills. And we'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on how we can grow, how we can develop as teachers in the kind of environment that we find ourselves in at the moment, which is so rapidly evolving, but also so uncertain. So I wonder if you could start in by telling us something about your own journey
Sure.
as
Yeah.
an EAP
Yeah.
teacher and how you developed your
Yeah.
practice over time.
Yeah. My background is originally I was a secondary teacher of foreign languages and music. Did that for quite a long time. Then did a postgraduate second language teaching qualification, which really I really wanted to do more in connection with foreign language teaching, but also ended up teaching some ESL in schools. I worked in Japan for 2 years in a senior high school and obviously got much more into the second language teaching and also taught corporate, fairly high level corporate classes there. Um, and then after returning to New Zealand, I worked in the English Language Centre at the university, which I've been at for a very long time. And I've just retired from Waikato University. So um, taught in the English Language Centre for a long time, and got involved in doing a PhD and tried to find areas of research which related more closely to what I was doing, and ended up very much looking at very much interested in text and genre. Um, and we had a fairly strong focus on discourse, text and discourse. The director, who was also my PhD supervisor, had done her PhD with Henry Widdowson at the University of London, and she in the 1980s, and she was very much in that the discourse analysis stream, which was current. People like Michael Hoey, Winter, that very text focused. I got interested particularly in the cognitive elements of discourse because I felt that was the missing dimension, and I've often looked at that area, particularly issues related to coherence and language. So it just kind of evolved from that. I have a long association with the University of Leeds English Language Centre and have collaborated with a number of staff there and still have ongoing involvements and connections with Leeds. Have been there quite a few times. So and always have been coming to BALEAP conferences since the early 2000s. So feel quite connected with the British EAP community, where I felt that it was there was an emphasis on scholarship and research, which I didn't see anywhere else, which was what interested me, and have appreciated those kinds of connections, because over here, obviously, it's everything is much smaller, and we don't have quite the community of practice that you people have in the UK. But yeah, that's sort of the story, basically. Yeah, yeah,
I think it's to me it's impressive that from the other side of the world, you're part of our community that is kind of based in Britain, and that you have kind of made that leap of connection really from New Zealand to BALEAP. I mean, I don't know what kind of profile BALEAP has in the Antipodes. I can't remember ever having heard of it when I was living in Australia. But I think, kind of what you're saying to me really is that actually BALEAP, although it calls itself this British association, is actually kind of global association,
Yeah,
really, in
yeah,
truth, huh? And that says something about our community of practice, doesn't it?
I think so. I think because the flagship journal is your association's journal, I think that's had quite a bit to do with it. But just the BALEAP conferences always have always had in the past, certainly. The only one I haven't been to is the most recent one. Always had people who keynotes and speakers who were fairly active in scholarship and research, and I think that's the key thing, and that's what maybe distinguishes BALEAP from some of the other English language communities. And also,
Mm.
text linguistics is a very European phenomenon. There's less of an interest in it in North America, and New Zealand has very close connections with the UK, so it wasn't a difficult connection to make. Also, Olwen Alexander, who used to be the chair of BALEAP, she's a graduate of the university that I taught in, so there's a few personal connections which kind of um, led to all of that. But yeah, so it is a global community. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I mean I was at the most recent conference and I don't recall meeting anyone from beyond Europe actually who
Mm.
was either presenting or attending. Um, were you kind of unusual in coming from the other side of the world to these BALEAP events?
In the past, no, not particularly. There were a few that came from New Zealand, and at times Australians surfaced there. I think post-COVID, there's been maybe um, and because of the financial situation, is more university staff don't get the funding to travel quite maybe in quite the same ways as they did beforehand. But um, and it's in previous decades, particularly um, from sort of the second decade of the century, the BALEC conferences had quite an array of people from different places. Yeah, in
Well,
my
I think that's a
yeah,
wonderful testimony
yeah,
about the power of BALEAP. And thinking about the most recent conference, yes, actually, there were quite a few presenters from China, and
mm,
most of them joined us, I think, online and gave their presentations
right,
online.
yeah, mm,
But I don't remember anyone from Australasia. But I think that, that says something, doesn't it, about the power of the brand,
yes,
really,
yeah.
um, that it can speak to practitioners right across the globe. What do you think, are the most pressing development needs for us as practitioners today? What do you think we really need to be focusing on in terms of our own professional development?
I think that from I've just been reviewing quite a bit for publishers and journals and things. It seems to me that the issue of embedding EAP or ESAP or specific EAP within schools, within um, specific sort of disciplinary groupings within universities seems to be very much a trend. I think you find it in the English language centres where that are very long standing that have kind of formed those relationships. I think it's a precarious activity. Depends a lot on the policies and personalities, leadership of the universities, whether they see the need for it and whether they're going to support it and finance it. But I think embedded EAP, particularly within graduate education, is quite important. There's the whole AI thing, which I have to say I don't feel very qualified to speak about. I've reviewed other people's work on that, and I think it presents particular challenges. But I'm thinking that maybe if we get a few years down the track, it'll be one of those blips that attracted a lot of attention at the time. But I think EAP will always have its basic core functions, which may adapt a little bit to technology, but the kind of academic literacy development that EAP tutors are involved in is always going to be, it's not going to fundamentally change in terms of what's required and what we do. But yeah, and of course there's all the economic and political situation at the moment, which is affecting centres quite seriously. A lot of contractions and things going on, and that's universal. It's over here. It's not just in the UK. Yeah.
And I guess then in that context, actually maintaining a strong community of practice through organizations like BALEAP, which can, not only foster our development as teachers, but also give us a sense of solidarity, is really important, isn't it? In a climate where there's this degree of uncertainty.
Yeah, I think that there's two issues. I think that we can't ignore the socioeconomic pressures and the politics of micropolitics too of the situation. And I think that the associations themselves maybe have to take more of a lead. And I think that it's not just BALEAP on its own. I think BALEAP has to link up with other tertiary level subject associations in terms of making representations on government policy levers that are going to have serious effects on the community. I think there's that. I think there's I think I said in the article, the 2021 article for the China-based journal, that online communities tend to operate at quite a superficial level. It tends to be sharing information, giving notices, saying when events are on. Maybe there could be a comment thread about an issue, but it's a bit difficult to engage in any kind of deep way asynchronously online. I think that the focused events like the PIMS that you have, and face-to-face, particularly when people can get the opportunity to interact in face-to-face groups, is really vital. And I think the PIMS and just the fairly steady series of events which BALEAP always organises is really vital for maintaining, for providing opportunities for professional CPD, ongoing professional development. It's a peculiar discipline because you tend to, the aircraft gets built while it's in the air very often, and you come in with knowledge maybe of language, of assessment. Your initial teacher education is probably given you can do language analysis. You can do, the tutors can do quite a lot around language, but there are complex areas of related to disciplinary texts and discourse and genre, and just just the focus on the university and its practices and discourses can be. There's quite a lot to develop, and also I've always said, I think that if you're working in the area, you need to find your niche. You need to find a particular topic that you can focus on and do scholarship on and share and become a resource for other people. It's very difficult to become an expert on everything because it's such a big the whole business of academic text and discourse and university practices is quite vast, and it's quite although it's not recognized, it's quite a complex subject discipline that we're dealing with. Yeah.
And how do you think the institution and perhaps we as a kind of senior practitioners, how can we kind of encourage and support, do you think, our colleagues, our younger colleagues particularly, to explore those niches that will enable them to engage in their own research, perhaps develop their own knowledge base? What do you think we can do?
Well,
I
well,
mean, for one another as much as for those who are, coming up in the profession.
there were a few case studies done about 10 years ago, mostly as master's theses in the UK, and almost all of those said that it was the input of senior colleagues, and it was maybe mentoring relationships, although they probably could be quite informal. That was where they gained a lot of the knowledge and expertise, and I think some kind of I don't know how you can formalize these things sometimes, but I think it's the learning from, it's the kind of community practice thing. It's acquiring the skills and knowledge and the kind of insights from people that have been in the field a while. That's vital. Um, I think it concerns me that when in the privatized centres, that sometimes the whole approach becomes a bit more commodified, textbook based. You're only paid
Mm.
for so many hours, and the kind of extra inputs and time and scholarship around it, which is needed, is just not part of the equation. It's not remunerated.
Yeah.
People's time is very kind of rationed.
Mm.
That's a negative, I think. Yeah.
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 And I mean, thinking about um, other strategies really for encouraging our professional development. So you've talked about mentoring, and
Mm.
can you think of any other approaches that are really important for us to think about how we're putting these into practice or putting them in place in our institutions?
I
Um,
think joint scholarship is really, really vital. And
mm, mm,
whether you call it scholarship or whether you call it research, there's a bit of a fine line between the two. In the book that Alex and I wrote, 2017 book, we said scholarship was what is activities that directly relate to practice and inform practice, whereas research is a kind of planned, systematic investigation of maybe more specialized or one particular element. But the two overlap. I mean, a lot of scholarship could be classed as research. I think joint projects, they're a big ask for people who are really teaching a lot of hours a week. You have to have the kind of a sort of motivation and the interest in the game to do it. But I think I know for myself, it's doing those things which is developmental, that gets you, moves you along, and it makes you read, it makes you inquire a bit, survey the field, look at the literature, that kind of thing. I think it's um, I think it's having that kind of focus that's really important. I think
mm,
joint scholarship, or scholarship generally, um, ideally maybe joint projects, especially for younger people,
mm,
that have fairly clear goals and kind of roadmaps, uh,
mm,
are really important. And of course, some institutions will support scholarship and provide a certain number of hours. Leeds does, which I think is
mm,
really great. And
mm,
others
mm,
don't. I have to say myself, um, everything was done in the early days in my own time. It wasn't. I was told by a dean that someone in your position doing a PhD is of no relevance. It's like at that time New Zealand had the America's Cup in yachting, and they said it's like someone involved in America's Cup yachting of interest, but of no practical relevance to your occupation. That I was put in my
wow,
place well and truly,
wow.
but but it didn't. I think they some people outside don't kind of get it. They see it as a highly commodified, commercialized sort of activity, and somehow. we have to get beyond that. But I don't know. You win the battle with some people, but and then new people come in, and you have to really litigate. It's that's just it's like the weather. You can't complain about it. Yes, I'll work with it, I'm afraid.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm impressed, Ian. I don't know at what point in your career that happened that the dean said that to you, but I'm impressed that, despite that coming from above, that kind of not particularly encouraging kind of advice, right? Or feedback. Nonetheless, you forged an important research career within EAP. So was that simply because of your own sort of sense of vision, or was it because there were other people working with you who were encouraging you? You had a group of colleagues that you collaborated with that, meant that the dean's words were just so much grist the mill.
Yes, I have to say, I my most encouraging involvements have been with BALEAP and with all the BALEAP people and with the leads, particularly the lead centre, but with other people in BALEAP. And that's kind of given a sense of purpose and meaning to things. And that's
Mm.
why the associations are important, I think.
Yeah.
It was a bit odd being over here in that, but somehow I wasn't made to feel like some kind of strange outsider. It was just somebody else. Um, because a lot of Bali people do work in other countries too. You've got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
realize, or certainly did. I'm not sure of the situation now. So it was a kind of remote thing. I mean, yes, there were conferences and that, but Australasia is pretty small, and Australia, which is the bigger community, it's academic language and learning, and it's got a slightly different emphasis. Um, they do pretty much a lot of the same things as the EAP tutors, but um, they're not quite such an identifiable community. If they're allied, they're allied with SFL or with LCT or something like that. So because of my interest in text and discourse, I sort of gravitated over to you people.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, I think what you're also saying is um, building a community of practice that's inclusive, that doesn't exclude anyone, that might call itself in case of Bali a British association, but is actually in reality an international association. That's very important, isn't it? That people don't feel like in some way they're excluded or you can't be connected because
mm,
I don't know, they're on the other side of the world, or um,
mm,
they don't have a PhD, or they haven't yet sort of defined their own research space.
mm.
I think that's really important, isn't it? That kind of welcoming research
Yes, yeah,
environment, that professional development environment is really important, isn't it?
yeah.
That it is welcoming, inclusive.
The people, the human dimension, obviously is really important, and I think it's finding who you connect with and just kind of working on those relationships. And it probably isn't going to be always in your own institution. It could be in other
Mm,
places.
mm,
But we don't have the PIMS. We don't have the. I mean, I taught applied linguistics and was responsible for a large in-sessional program, which I taught on a bit and helped design the courses for. So I was kind of a foot in both camps, um, and that's how I guess I got an academic position and was able to sort of stay in the game for long. Um, it was fortunate. I think it was a product of the time, but yeah, I think it's the people dimension, and it's being able to connect with finding a crowd that you can relate to and connect to and do things with, and that doesn't have to be highly formal. It can be it's often comes down to quite close personal interpersonal relationships sometimes.
Yeah, and you've written about this in the article that you mentioned earlier, that it's not just about the exchange of ideas, the participation in the events, and you encourage us to do that not just online but in person. But
Mm.
it's also the social interactions that are really important, and I think that's what you're touching upon there.
Yeah, well, the sense of belonging, and especially at the moment when centres are being forced to retrench, that kind of thing, that
mm,
that can fracture groups and be a bit disruptive. But
mm.
that's why the associations organising events like you are is probably even more important than it has been at times in the past. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I guess it's important also for our institutions to recognize our involvement in organizations like BALEAP and
yeah, yeah.
where they can encourage us and sponsor us in doing that. I mean, I know, for example, that Leeds is very generous in supporting its EAP practitioners and attending things like the BALEAP conference, even if it's the other end of the country.
Mm,
And I was amazed by the kind of financial support that my colleagues in Leeds get, and one could only dream of it, I think, in many places.
mm.
But that's important for us as well, because we're not the highest paid professionals in the world,
No,
are we?
no, no. Um, I think I want to say you, it's an academic subject. A lot of people say it's not, like my dean that didn't think it was. And you, um, I think you gain recognition from your institutions through your activities, through your research, and through your publications. If they're metric driven, and I don't know, I'm not sure if BALEAP people have to participate in the REF or something, or we have an equivalent thing over here. We did. I
Mm,
think it's been
mm,
canned for financial reasons. But I think um, just reputational things that you can achieve through projects, through publications. They don't have to be big publications, but just being active in scholarship and going into print and doing your publications goes a long way with keeping the institutions happy, kind of ticking the boxes, if, as it were. Um, and particularly because you have the TEF, we don't.
mm,
I think there's a lot of scope there for gaining kind of reputational recognition or for recognition for the role of the EAP tutor within universities. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Just to finish up, Ian, how do you feel about the future of the profession? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? What kind of signs
I,
are there, do you think, for being one thing or the other for you
I'm a little,
personally?
I sort of geographically am a bit isolated. So, I mean, everything is, I do keep in contact. I mean, I have Zoom meetings every week with Leeds people and that and on stuff that I'm doing. But I think that I I sort of my feeling for as far as the UK goes, that because of the current situation in the United States, that um, and because of demand for I mean, the UK universities are seen in Asia as a desirable kind of place to study abroad and that kind of thing.
Mm,
I think
mm,
that ultimately um, EAP will keep going, and I think that there could potentially be an expansion, particularly if America becomes more isolationist, which it seems
mm,
to be. Not,
mm,
not I don't think the university people want that, but politically. Um, I think that I've been involved with the China EAP Association a bit and done plenaries and the journal article was for their journal or for the journal that um, there's been a lot of talk in China for a number of years of a shift in emphasis from college English to EAP, and I'm not quite sure where that's at. But if they were really seriously going to do that, um, I think there's going to be huge demand for kind of EAP expertise. I don't know, things are in a state of flux at the moment, so it's a little
mm,
bit difficult to predict. And then you've got the AI thing and all of that. But I think that universities, EAP people will transcend that. I think that's just something that we're adapting to at the moment, but I don't see it as going to be huge. I don't think that the knowledge base of EAP and what the EAP tutor is required to do will change fundamentally. Some of the tools we use may be different, but
Mm.
yeah. So I guess that's a bit muddly. But I
There's a
mean,
future for us. I think that's what you're saying. Huh?
yeah,
That's what I hear you
I
saying.
think there
Yeah.
is. I think there is. It may not be quite the same. I think the more that we focus on scholarship expertise, research, and developing
Mm.
practitioners, the more robust we make the field.
Mhm.
Um, that
The more likely it is to survive, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Thank you so much,
You're
Ian,
very
for taking
welcome.
this time early on a Saturday morning for you. I
Yes,
can see the light slowly
it's
rising in
just
the
coming.
sky outside.
It's 0 degrees here, so it's
Whoa, whoa. And I think we had 20 today in
yeah,
London, so
yeah. So it's
that's the
just
big difference, huh?
a foggy winter's morning here. Yeah,
Well, thank you again
yeah.
very
You're very
much
welcome. Yeah,
for speaking to us as part of our PIM.
yeah. Okay. Thank you, Lachlan. Yeah.